Good morning.
How you guys doing? Oh, I should put some hat on so I'm not all bald up.
I can be bald for all of us.
There you go. Well, I'm doing pretty all right too.
I'll grow some hair for all of us.
Yeah. How is everybody doing? Have you guys been able to look at Canvas a little bit yet?
Yes.
Yep.
Good. Are you getting overwhelmed yet?
A little bit.
A little bit. Well, that's the whole point of a summer class, right? Speedy Gonzalez is in town. So what I want to do today, let's get a couple more minutes. Actually, I have, let's do a couple more minutes. Wait, let me close my window. Then, well, or we start with questions. Anybody have some questions come up yet that are in your head?
No.
That's either real good or real bad.
Well, they will come.
Huh?
The questions will come, don't worry.
Yeah. No. Well, let's just start, because whoever adds on or doesn't add on, they can watch the video. So it's been recorded, and then I post the recordings online, hopefully the same day. And usually I ship you a text or Pronto. Everybody know how Pronto works?
The messaging app?
No, I've not used it.
Not used it either.
Sorry about this telephone in the back. It will fade out in a moment. Well, that Pronto is one way I communicate. Texting is actually texting, and Pronto is the two things I like the most in communication. Email through Canvas is also good, but I see them a little bit later sometimes, because in the summer I should be on it every day for sure. But texting is great, and I just do Pronto as well. Not everybody works with Pronto, and in this fast class, if you don't have access or you don't figure it out, or don't worry about it. We'll just go through texting then, or email. Okay, so I want to make sure you focus on the material. Let me just, and then another thing in terms of the way I work with Canvas, with Zoom, you don't need to hold up your hand or anything. You just speak into me and disrupt me when there's a question coming up, because I'm doing screen share, so I can't see you necessarily, and I'm just monologuing, trying to stay focused as much. And so if I have to multitask, I'm not good at that. So just different in the class, just interrupt me. Don't feel bad about it. If you have a question, everybody has a question, as far as I'm concerned. All right, let me go and, let me go. Unfortunately, this is hopefully going to work. Wrong tab. There, you didn't see that. All right, so you can see my screen?
Yep.
Good. Yeah, if somebody gives me a feedback, yeah. Oh, look at that. Great. I didn't log in yet this morning. I've been busy trying to add students. There is, of course, last minute add-ons, which is great. But I want to basically give you a overview of how the class works, how I think you should study, or how I study for this stuff, how the tests work and what it all entails. And then that's pretty much it. So as we start here, when you open Canvas, you're gonna get this home screen, which, look, I made a video with a nice background from my home. And then from there, you can enter the class. You can enter through the tabs down here into the material. You go to syllabus, etc., etc. But basically, everything is also over here. Let me go to student view, so that way you don't see everything. You see what you see. There you go. And over here is pretty much where you want to access the stuff. Usually on this side over here, you see a Pronto thing, but I don't have one. If you don't have one, again, don't worry about it if you're not already used to. Pronto is sort of an enclosed space texting app situation. That way we're not just on the whole World Wide Web, but it's really not anything different than that. So don't worry about it if it's not your jam. The third way to communicate is this inbox over here. If you can see my cursor on the left, and that's just the Canvas internal email function. Good. When we go in, we want to go through modules. Again, that's how we enter the class. And then the class is built up on modules, is kind of chapters. I mostly make them in weeks. We have week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5. We actually, week 6 is test. Then I put 3 modules up for tests. And then in the beginning, I have a few that are class orientation and learning tools. Class orientation, every module sort of starts with what are you learning in here? You know, you don't really, you know, this is, some of that is a little superfluous, some of that for most of us, but we have it for completion, we have it for compliance, and again, we want to serve every student we can, and so some of the stuff is explained multiple times that many of us can understand it. So that's Meet Me is basically a hello, who I am a little bit. I'm from Switzerland. I have first learned insurance administration, then came to the States, studied massage, and then I studied chiropractic, and then I got swooped into the school system and started teaching anatomy somewhere in 2005. So it's been a while and I've been loving it. It's a wonderful thing. We have Halloween sometimes in the classroom, right now not, but sometimes we do. And that's pretty much all that is about me. I have a practice in Oakland. I practice 3 days a week right now with the pandemic, but that's my primary job. And then teaching is sort of my love hobby. You can, from a page, you can go back to modules and then enter again through the modules, or if you want to just move within your own, from sequentially, go to the next button or the previous button and move through it this way. This is just ways to connect with me. That's the Pronto. I didn't put the text in there, but that's really actually the most preferred to myself because I can see it anywhere. You can reach me right away. Do not feel bad reaching out. Just reach out. I got a question. I don't, oh, look at that. There's a wrong date in here, wrong time in here. Reach out any time of the day. If I'm asleep, I put the phone somewhere else, so don't even worry about it. What I do not want is you guys have anxiety about how this class works. And that includes material. Gosh, Dr. M, I don't understand this stuff. And then we can make a Zoom meeting together and we can go and dissect it a little better. I'm here for you. I'm basically your coach. That's how I see it. All right, I'll go back through modules because we don't need to touch on all of those. How you communicate, same difference. That's just compliance stuff to be complete. Celebrate diversity. Of course, we celebrate diversity. We love everybody. And there's a little blurb on that. Help improve the course. I've built this course by asking the students how to make it better. So that remains the same. So if you have hints, ideas, criticism about it, you know, then please speak up, text me. We could talk about it. I can help. You're going to help improve the course. I mean, most things I've made because it works for the students. Then we got the good old syllabus. Let's go through the good old syllabus. This is about the human body. It's about you, basically, learning about terminology. Summaries, we kind of don't go into all the details in the summer. I dropped the pathology project, which is a group project. And also in my material, I have a health kit integration exercises. They also do not do during the summer because it just gets too much. But basically we learn about the body. When we look at the course outline, we have today, we're going to touch on the introduction, chemistry, cytology, that's the cells and then the tissues. And then next week is mostly muscle and bones. And then we get to the heart, the immune system, endocrine, and integumentary, that's the skin, hormones and skin, and then we spend a week on the neurology, brain, etc. And then we finish up with the digestion, respiratory, urinary, and repro system, as well as we have a little bit of nutrition and embryology in there, which I think is very useful. The dates in all the exercises that come up are sort of given as when they're due. But since this is such a fast semester, you do what you can. And if you work ahead, if you're a little bit behind, don't fall too far behind. It's a little hard to catch up if it's too much on this kind of short timing. But these are sort of hard dates, but you know, I do give a penalty for late work is a % per day late. But again, if at the end that's what makes a difference, that thing has been thrown out. That's really just to keep you guys accountable a little bit more. I found that works a little bit better if there's a little bit of a you know, your points is my money, you know, and I can kind of keep you at bay with that a little bit. And again, most people that doesn't even apply to. The same for the tests. I try to give you a fairly long range for when you can take the tests. So there's basically a whole week. The last one is not a whole week. Maybe we'll open it again. Suggestions are great. This course is your course. It needs to work for you. I got my parameters that need to be obeyed. Of course, I need to integrate it that way, but it's your course. It needs to work for you. So if you have a recommendation on that or something doesn't work, we can work on it. We can talk about it and we can try to make it happen so it works for you. Anyway, that's not that important. We do that already. Student objectives, this is just blurbs that end up being blurbs. Class text. There is no class text, so to speak. Everything is online. However, I did create, first I created these booklets that, come on, they're up here. I created this series of 6 textbooks that it was mandatory at some point, and then now it's not mandatory, but it does help a lot because it's basically anatomy is a picture course. It's really about looking at pictures and naming things and understanding things, and text is nice and all right, but it's, you know, written words, and you got to have a picture, and then we got to make a word, and then you got to translate the word you're reading back into a picture. And so what I did here is I basically created picture booklets and have videos embedded in them with barcodes. And so it just kind of works seamlessly that way. I started really going visual with my class when my own daughter had studied massage therapy and at some point just kind of lost her marbles a little and said like, God, I'm so stupid. I don't understand these words and I can't make a picture. And I'm like, honey, it is not you. It's really actually the system, because most of us are visual people, kinesthetic people, you know, not just professorial here. This is what we read and then we have it in our system. I fall asleep if it's that way. I have to underline things and work with the material, so to speak. Also in there, you have anatomy, labeling, coloring exercises that we go through. I'll show you what that means today. And then this is the health kit. This is exercises like when we do the muscles of the leg, we do squats and see like which ones burn and, well, why would they burn? Oh, they are the ones that keep us up. They're anti-gravity muscles. So I have these exercises in there that we don't cover in this summer course, but I have them there anyway. And if you're interested in those things, you just shoot me a text. I can also send you a link so you have it electronically. Because some of you guys, I have like an injury prevention seminar in there that's pretty high end from an orthopedic perspective. And depending on where you go, if you go to PT or so, physical therapists later on, some of these things might be interesting to have. Good. That's my spiel about that. Oh, well, since we're here at the learning tools, we might as well go here as well. I'm a big proponent of flashcards. Neurons that fire together, wire together. So when we look at studying material, this material, particularly where it's a lot of memorization and integration, understanding that way, what is what called, we can understand how the brain works with neurons. Neurons are nerve cells and they attach to one another. And when we have a thought, that's one pathway that gets stimulated, and that's the thought. When we do a thought repeatedly over and over, that stimulation gets stronger. And the reason why it gets stronger is because the nerves at the end feed back to the nerves in the beginning and stimulate that cycle sort of automatically. And they call that the reverberating circuit. And so if we study, for example, material, and we repeat it over and over, then we get this pathway stronger and stronger. Now, of course, if you just read, I don't know how you work, but I space out. And so if I just read a word and say like, oh, that's there, then I kind of space out. If I have to look for something, if I test myself and say like, where is that term? Where is the nose situated in the body? And I have to not see a picture where it points to the nose, but I have no picture, and I have to remember, oh, it's the thing in the front here sticking out. Then my stimulation of that pathway becomes stronger. And because of that, I like flashcards a lot. So flashcards is the system where, you know, I put let's say I put a picture of the leg or a leg muscle on one side, and I have muscles that you can, you know, print out and cut out and put on one side, and on the other side is what is that muscle called? And I look at the word of the muscle, and I've got to remember, where is that muscle? Where is that muscle? Where is that muscle? Oh yeah, there is where that muscle is. Or I have the picture that shows the muscle, say, what is that called? What is that called? I have to think about it. And that thinking is a little bit painful. That's that thing of studying that we go like, oh, I don't want to do it. But if we do that, we strengthen this circuit tremendously. And so that's one reason why I like flashcards. The other reason why I like flashcards very heavily is this system called the Lightner System, which comes from the 70s out of Germany. And I had to study French. I'm from Switzerland, so German Switzerland. So we have to study French for like 7 years, 5 hours a week, which is like, ugh. And you got to learn all these different words. And so they showed us this system where you make flashcards of, let's say, the terms of the muscles in the body that we're going to go through. And then you have, let's say, 10, 20 flashcards in your hand, and you study them a little through the day. And then in the evening, you test yourself. It's like, hey, which ones do I know? Which ones do I not know? And then the ones you know, you can put in a room number 1, box number 1, or clip. I make clips, you know, these clips that can hold it. Clip number 1, and then you put them to the side. And the ones you don't know, the ones you didn't remember, you put back in your pocket to learn again the next day more. And then the next evening, you also test yourself on the ones that were in box 1. And if you still know it, you put it in box 2. If you don't remember it, you put it back in your pocket, because there's a term you haven't figured out yet. But the ones that you know, you can move along. And to move along on box 2, let's say you test yourself twice a week. So on Wednesday, you test it again. A few days later, it's like, oh, look, I still remember it. Great. Go into box 3. The ones you don't remember, go right back into here. It says box 1. Box 1 or the pocket. That just depends on how many sections you do. I say pocket, so you know that's the one I study again instead of just testing myself again the next day. And then in box 3, you say, let me test it once a week. See if I still remember those in box 3. If you do, go, good. Box 4, no problem. If you don't, back into the place where you can study it, et cetera, et cetera. Then after box 3, I go like, you know, in a fast semester like this, you don't have a few weeks, but the box 4, I would study again before, I would test myself again before the test. And then if I know it, great. If I don't, it goes back, well, you know, wherever it goes. But box 5 is sort of the holding place. However many boxes, it doesn't really matter. But what you do is that process, you weed out the stuff that you know, and you don't just keep looking at it and not really getting anything out of it. And you focus your studies on the stuff you don't know yet. And that's the main reason why I really like the flashcards. It makes it not boring. It makes a little bit more work at first because you create them, but the creation is also most of us humans are kinesthetic. Like if you look at what kind of learning styles we have visual people that see, people that hear, they learn good with hearing. And then I have to like train myself listening to podcasts. If I see anything else that interests me, I don't remember what the podcast said. And then, you know, and so that's, I'm probably not auditory that way. And then the majority of us have a kinesthetic component, meaning we have to have hands-on activities with something, touchy-feely stuff. And making flashcards, for example, is actually a kinesthetic process, if you think about it. Anyway, enough said on that front. Again, if you have any questions, comments, just talk into me. Don't be shy. I want this to be a little bit of an interaction. Or if I'm too boring, say, move on, we're good. Anyway, Canvas orientation, we don't need to go through this too much more. I think this is it. Let's see if I missed anything on the syllabus. Yeah, I did. The grading, I'm sure. Attendance policy, not to worry about. Grading. There we go. So, no, you know what? Let me feed back to that after I explain the course. If I forget, can please somebody keep score that I don't forget? Because if I just tell you now out of the blue, that doesn't make too much sense. Let's just go right into week 1. Or in the weeks, how the week modules are built up. So the week modules are built in a way that the first tab is a preview. That's basically what we're doing now. I'm going to post the video here for later viewing. That's the Zoom. And then after that, we get into the objectives. And this is all you're learning in week 1. And you can actually see how many other weeks the other classes have, because each of these is a regular week in a regular semester. So we first say, what do we learn? We learn about matter and energy. We learn about the fundamentals of an atom in chemistry. And then we have organic and inorganic compounds. And then afterwards, we list what the assignments are and when they're due. Most of the time, we have questions. We watch videos. We have questions. And then we have some discussions of concepts that I want you to be a little bit more familiar with. But a lot of the times we have, not in the first week, we have labeling and coloring exercises. And I'll go through each one of those different types of exercises. After the objective in each week, we have a bunch of chapters. These are sort of the book that we're reading or, going through. So if I start with number 1, they're all set up the same way. They first have videos, and I have 2 sets of videos. I have a voiceover PowerPoint lecture. So that's, whoa, I don't have to do that. You can do that yourself. Those are shorter, about 10-minute videos. They explain the material, me talking into the computer. But then I also have, and I have some transcripts too, although I'm still working on them. It's really hard to do transcripts. It takes me a long, long time. So the first 2 chapters have them, and then the other ones I'm working on. But I also have a set of video where I'm in the classroom teaching. A few years before the pandemic, I just started, trying to use my phone properly and made videos of all the lectures that I gave. And so you don't have to watch both. You just have to watch one, or I think you should watch one set. Test out which ones you like better, and then go for that. So I have a lot of material on here, but you don't need to go through everything. So like the lectures, you don't need to watch both. You can, but you don't have to watch both. It's the same material. Choose which one you prefer better. But I've done that because some like one better than the other when I test out and I ask the students. So I leave them both in there. Then I have some study tips, the flashcards we talked about. The way I made my booklets is by Googling images. And so the booklets have a lot of images explaining things. On here, I'm basically bound to using official sources that I can with images. And so if you want to understand a concept better, I recommend go to Google and put them top, and you look for something like level of structural organization or something, and you press images, and you get a ton of images coming up, and you can actually download those in a Word document and have your own textbook made. Also, what I did here, the main concepts, I have all the concepts we need in bullet points. Down, no if and ands and buts, just the nuts and bolts that I'm interested in you knowing. And then I sometimes put some videos that are from an external source, and just if somebody recommends it to me. These are most likely student recommendations. Some of them are from my own thinking and looking out, but most likely student recommendations, which again brings me to the point, if you find something cool, you let me know. We can always make things better, and it's all about you bringing the information across. It's not about, can we make it as complicated as possible? Because honestly, anatomy is not really that complicated. It's just a lot of stuff. And that's really it. And physiology is also, we can make it very complex and use words half of us don't understand, or we can actually explain it in ways that is understandable, which is what we should be doing. as teachers, I think. So we start with an introduction to anatomy. Then we go a little bit more into what are the levels of organization. Like we start with the small atom. We get to molecules like water is a molecule. We get to cells like a muscle cell. Then we get to tissues. This is all week one, actually. Like we have 4 types of tissue. These are like fabrics, like a muscle is a tissue type, nerve is a tissue type. And then we got epithelial tissue and connective tissue, which will go into depth. So the 4 main types. And then we go to organs. So we bring different tissues together. We can make a heart, and a heart is an organ, or a bladder. A bladder is an organ. And then we go to organ systems, which is the whole cardiovascular system or the whole urinary system. And at the end, putting all those systems together makes you and I, makes a human, makes an organism. For us, it's a human, since we do in anatomy, physiology of humans. And then briefly, we'll talk about the different organ systems. Again, bullet points. These are bullet points. These are great for making flashcards. You don't even have to dissect the material. It's sort of pre-dissected for you already. Also, you know, you can copy paste this stuff. Take a screenshot and make your own thing. At the end of the semester, this stuff, the canvas goes away for you. So if you want to retain some of that and make your own books or whatever it is, if you don't want to get mine, do that. Make that yourself. Then we talk about things that we need to survive, like we need movement. With no movement, the food don't go through the body. We can't walk to the water spout and drink, so we probably wouldn't make it and wouldn't survive. We need to be responsive. We need to be, you know, irritability means if you poke me, my body has a reaction. If the water is too hot and I put my hand underneath, it pulls it away. That's what that is. We need to be able to break down food and bring it into an area where we can pick it up, because food will give us energy. And that's then metabolism. So there's a bunch of those that we need to live, functions that we need to live, and then there's things that we need to survive. We need nutrients, we need oxygen. Obviously, we kind of know that. It's just spelled out. We are not going to survive if the internal body temperature is 90 degrees Fahrenheit throughout. We're not that kind of an animal. We need to have a certain level of internal body temperature. That is a need. Well, actually, it's kind of weird that they put that in a need, but that's in the survival need compartment. The atmospheric pressure makes more sense. If the air is too thin on Mount Everest, you can't breathe, you can't get oxygen. Guess what? It's not going to be a good thing to live there. Unless your body adapted to some of that. Homeostasis is a very important concept, a very good concept. It basically means, when you look at the word, homeo means same, stasis means standing still or being stable. And so what homeostasis means, it's the process that in the inside of the body, we have a stable environment. Things are not out of a certain level. You know, the sugar in the blood is not out of a certain level. That wouldn't be good over time. Oxygen content needs to be a certain way, et cetera, et cetera. And in order to keep that information, that the body's job is to keep that internal environment stable, even though the outside changes. You can go outside. This morning it was cool. When I started walking, by the time I finished, I was sweating because it was hot. My body needed to get rid of some heat. That's the sweating. And so it has these ways of keeping this homeostasis. And most of the time, keeping that homeostasis, actually all of the time, keeping that internal level, that internal environment at a certain level is done through what we call a negative feedback mechanism. And that simply means, negative doesn't mean bad. Negative just means the opposite. We should call it the opposite feedback mechanism. That simply means when it's too hot, we're going to, you know, and the body temperature rises on the inside, we got to do things to bring it down. Unless we're sick, and then the body wants it high so we can burn the pathogens, which is also good, which brings us, of course, to questions like, well, why would I take a fever medication when my fever is not out of bounds? Because I'm kind of not helping my body. Maybe I feel better and I can go to work, which is questionable. But, you know, maybe I'm not helping my body. And if you look at the babies nowadays, when they go to the hospital being sick, they monitor them for alertness. They don't just give them pain meds. They let that fever spike at times because the baby can tolerate that. And so these are interesting questions that come up when we study these things. And so the negative feedback mechanism simply means we have it too hot on the inside, we got to turn the air conditioning on. and figure out what does that mean, that we can bring that body temperature back down. So the negative means bringing it back into range. And so there's a bunch of how that system works. You go through that. And then we have also a positive feedback mechanism. And that is, if it gets too hot on the inside, the body makes everything to make it even hotter. That's not a good thing. So most of the time, that is not what we want. We don't make it more want to make it more extreme. There is a few things that, though, there's a few physiological things that do that, utilize that positive feedback mechanism. And it's physiological. Most of the time, positive feedback mechanisms are pathological. They make us sick, like cancer, for example. More. But in childbirth, we want that uterus contracting more until that baby comes out, and then we can relax. Same with the milk letdown. We want that when the baby starts sucking on the breast because it wants food. We want that stimulus to make that milk letdown get stronger and stronger until it comes down. And that's a positive feedback mechanism. The other example that we often use is blood clotting. If you bleed, you want to patch that blood vessel up, pump more until it's patched up. And so those are examples of such. Anyway, and then the second part of that first chapter, introduction, goes into the terminology of naming things like regional terms. What's what called? You know, what's this? Is the carpals. Okay, the wrist means carpal. The thumb means pollex. The mouse means oris. And so there are all these terms that describe things. And the reason why we start with that, one of the reasons is, for example, the upper arm means brachium. When we get to muscle, we got like 4 or 5 muscles that have the word brachia in it. And so when you see the word brachia, you know, oh, it's in the upper arm. So if you study these terms well, you can then easier categorize things that we learn further down the line. And so that the like popliteus, there's actually a muscle called the popliteus behind the knee, although we don't study that in this class. But or gluteus, you've probably heard of the glute, the buttocks, the glutes muscles, the glutes. Those are the butt muscles. When you know that now, when we get to the butt, when we study those muscles, no big deal. You got the name already in there. So that's why I think these initial terms are important and good. So again, test yourself, put a sheet of paper over here, go down and see, do you remember that? Do you remember that? And then that's your testing. And then if you don't, you study it a little bit more and come up with a mnemonic, come up with something really silly, something visual. I believe me, that you will remember forever and ever. And I've seen it in myself all the time. When I look at this anatomy stuff, a lot of the silliest mnemonics that I did, I just don't make no sense, but they totally make sense for my brain. Then we also have directional terms. Directional terms means something is above something else or below something else. So we have, for example, above means superior, below means inferior. Or also we sometimes use the word cranial and caudal. So I want you to go through some of those and study those a little bit. So then when you describe something, it's like, oh, your nose is superior to your mouth. I mean, obviously it is, but that's the way you use the term. Or the mouth is inferior to the nose, for example. We have an exercise, we go in that through those terms. Then we do anatomical position. The anatomical position is a position that is used to reference everything. And basically that is you standing up straight and you got your palms forward. That's it. It's just a reference position that we had to create in anatomy to be able to describe things, even if a person is laying crooked in a bed or so. You then can't say like, you still have to be able to say like, well, this is above this and this is on the right side of this or so forth. So you have to be able to reference it. And in order to reference this, we always go back to that standing up, palm forward position. Then we got a brief on body planes. That's mostly used for MRIs and X-rays and stuff like that. And then we end up this chapter with body cavities. The body wants to remain separate. It doesn't want to be all mixed up. The brain does not want to be mixed with the lungs. And so we have to create, or the thoracic cavity is mostly air. The lungs are mostly air. The gut's mostly water. We do not want them to mix. We want them to be separate. And so we create these different cavities. We have the abdominal cavity, the pelvic cavity, or abdominal pelvic together. We got the thoracic cavity, and then we got the cranial cavity and the vertebral cavity for the most part. So that's what that describes. And then you're done with that chapter. And then when you go back, now you have to go back to modules because all the videos on the same are one after the other. But then when you are done with that, you go to questions. And you see all these questions here. The first two, I want to have a little orientation questions. So you give me feedback or you think a little bit about what you expect from me and what you expect from yourself. Those are sort of extra credit almost. And then I have a discussion on the study tools, the flashcards that I just went through, because I think that's such an important concept. I want us to talk a little bit about it. And when we go through study discussions, we talk with each other. And so discussions, what I want from you is I want from you to, read what I ask you here, and then you go in the discussion board below and you reply and you write something, or you can make a video, or you can make an audio. And so I have instructions of how to make a video here. It's in the orientation module. So you don't have to type. If you don't like to type and write, I don't really like that. You can make a video. It's no problem. And I have these questions that I want you to go through there. And then how you do it, you go on the bottom, and on the bottom says reply. And then you start either putting a video in, which you can go through here when you make a video with Canvas, with Studio. And again, if you have a problem with that, reach out to me and hopefully I can help you. Or you can just type and then you post that. And then once you post it, you see everybody else's replies. And then I want you to read a few of those. Every discussion is like that. I want you to read a few of those or listen to a video of somebody, 2, I think I asked, and give some feedback. So like, hey, that was really cool. I learned something. And you say what you learned. And you can make a video again, and you can write up a little thing. And then lastly, if somebody tells you, hey, that was great, you say thank you, because that way the other person knows they actually read it. And that's that last part, the reply to the response. And again, the word, how many words, that's a guideline. If you simply say yes, no, I will probably tell you that's not sufficient. But you don't have, this is a guideline, you don't have to be exact with these counts. All right, so that's that. Again, any questions? So far, so good?
We are gonna we're gonna present the week's chapter like this every week. That is the purpose of our weekly session.
Yeah, except today we're going through the way that the class works as well a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. So then, yeah, after you watch the videos and work through the material, then you have questions. And these are quiz format questions. However, you can take them as many times as you want. It's not timed. And the highest score will count. So this is kind of busy work, but it's like how I want you to marinate the data in your head. I started these when I started the videos when I had the class watching, where to go on vacation in Bermudas. I'm like, that's not good. I got to put that phone to work. And then I got into the classroom and I started lecturing. It felt like I'm just lecturing to a hall, to a room of people. No, I have no idea what I'm talking about. I got really pissed off. And I was like, God, I'm not going to teach anymore if the people are interested. That's like an empty, that's not fun. And so one of my boss then said, like, well, they actually rely on you. There's not that many good teachers, blah, blah, blah. I was like, okay, how can I deal with that? So then I created these questionnaires, and I had the students do the questionnaires before the class. And then I went into the class and I solved the questionnaires. And so now we were online. And so those questionnaires made it into the online format. And that turns out to be a pretty good deal, because you're listening to the videos, you're looking at the bullet points, and then you're reading the things again and answer some questions with it. And that way, then you kind of understood the material. Also, because I did all of these integration sessions in the class, I actually have a video on the whole thing, solving the quiz. And forever and ever, I didn't put those up. But then last semester, I'm like, why don't I put those up too? Because once you watch that as well, you probably get the material. So you can also go back and say, hey, let me take the quiz a couple of times and then let me see, you get graded on it so you can do the corrections, but maybe you want to know a little bit more or the background data of why that's the answer. It's all in that video for the most part. And so every single chapter has that setup, the videos, the bullet points, and then those questionnaires. And then we have a few chapters that have the first week has some discussion forums, and those are on the topic, those concept discussions. And here are the questions for the first week. And then you do the same. You post, you reply, you make a video, or you type it up, and then you read a few of the classmates, and they're like, oh, look, that's a way I haven't thought about it. Or maybe one of the questions you have no freaking clue about, and you go like, dude, I just can't figure that out. Can somebody help me? And you type that, because then somebody can help you. And if you still don't get any answer, you ask me and I can help you. And we might make a little video of it, and then everybody gets the goodies. So I have a few of those in the beginning of the sessions. And then also the first week only has one of those labelings, but in the follow-up weeks, every chapter has them, because down here, these label coloring, and sometimes there's questions with them. These are basically how we learn the anatomy terms, or how I make it so we learn the anatomy terms. So when you go through those, let's see, there is again, oh, there it is. So that's the skull. That's week 2, but it's just for the process of how it works. Purpose, overview, blah, blah. You then, what you do is you have all these terms. Sorry, I'm moving around a little bit. You have all these terms that I list here, and all these terms I want you to label on a picture, and I want you to color that term on the picture. So you can either print out the picture from up here, it gets you to a link, and then you can print it out, or if you have the booklets, you buy the booklets, it's already printed out for you. And you fill it out there, and then you take a picture and upload the picture to Canvas, and I process the picture, or I grade the picture. And by the way, these are videos. All these terms have videos where I show them to you, so you watch the videos. These are, I think, most of them have one video, but then some of them I have a couple, because I also used to teach Bio 2, and so I just put all of them in there. So all the terms are covered. So you do that, or so you fill out on the paper, or you can actually go in here and you can, oh crap, and you can annotate. I haven't really done it myself, but you can annotate in here and do it directly online, and then upload that. So you don't have to print it out if you can't print it out, or you don't want to print it out. Doesn't matter. You can do it like that. These are barcodes. I used to do everything with barcodes, which people thought was brilliant, but I just looked it up on a milk carton back when, in 12 or 11 or something. But these videos are basically the ones that are posted up there. So those are the same. So you don't have to worry about barcode looking at that. But if you have the paper, it's easy. If you're, hanging out somewhere or in a cafe or so, it's easy for you guys to get to the videos that way. Good. Oh, look, and each exercise has a, what is that called? A rubric. And so you can see in the rubric what I want from you exactly, and what the points are that I give you for that. And if you see here, the quizzes are, the questionnaires for the lectures are different. That's auto-graded. You get, 15 out of 16 or whatever. But on these exercises, you either get all of them or you get none of the points. And so what I do is when I grade these, I grade for completion, and I spot grade. I don't grade everything. But if you give me a sheet and I don't see all the terms on there, you're going to get a 0 here. And then you got to go back and make sure all the terms are on there, and then I give you the 5 points. Same with the coloring. The reason why I do the coloring, oh, it's colored, that's boring. Once in a while, I get one of those, but for the most part, I get, oh, that's kind of a cool exercise. And the reason why I do the coloring is because you spend some time with the material, and it helps the brain understand the material a little bit better. So also, you give me all the terms, you get the 5 points here, but you don't color nothing. You get zippy here. You got to go back to the coloring, then you get the points. And so again, it's busy work. In some ways, it's busy work. If you put in the work, you get the points. That's what I mean by that. It's not work that is not necessary. All right, good. Let's leave this page. Let's see where that goes. So that's for that. And then what else is there? I think that's it. Well, then let me get, before I go to the other chapters, what time is it? Anybody got the time? Oh, shoot, I got about 10 minutes. Oh, and then every week finishes with a Padlet, questions and tips. I want you to, reflect, press here, write a little bit. Hey, this week I learned so-and-so. I was easy for me, was hard for me. This is what I didn't get, et cetera, et cetera. I'm confused, whatever it is. And I go through those and I answer those because this is a format for me where I can also learn how the class goes for you guys. So every week we got one of those. Again, that gives you another 5 points. And then also, congratulations, just this week we covered all of this and we did all of these assignments. That's about what that is. But then further reading, to finish that up, is basically I have 2 links there. I have an open source anatomy book where you can go to, where you can go read more into detail if that's what you want to do. So that's a really good handy thing. That's for free. That is OpenStack. And then the other thing I did is a YouTube lecture series from this woman called Marion Diamond, and she was a UC Berkeley professor of anatomy, very, very famous. She used to own Einstein's brain, and she is phenomenal. She's passed by now. She was, this was when she was in her 70s and 80s. I have patients who took the class with her at Berkeley in the 70s. But this is a very good, in-depth, very entertaining and interesting lecture series if you want to know more and go more into depth on oh crap, what did I just do? There we go. Go more into depth on the material. So every chapter, every week finishes up with that. All right, now let's go to the test. We have 3 tests. And the only difference with the tests is you can't take them twice. You can just take them once. They're all open book. There's no closed book stuff. So all that memorization, you still want to do it, but you don't have to. I'm more interested in you knowing where to look things up than you being able to recite back to me and then tomorrow you forgot it. That's not helpful to me. But the first exam is 55 questions, true, false, multiple choice. I give you 2 hours. And so 55 questions, 2 hours. I hope that will work out. And here, look what I have. I have all the concepts that are on the test listed for all the chapters. And so if you know and understand this list, and of course there's one for every chapter, then you're good with this test for number 1. You can also go to print the PDF out if you want. I made, basically it's the same thing. I just have it on a piece of paper, so you can print that out and have that handy. Some of this is wrong, 75 minutes, that's not accurate anymore. But all of this data is essentially, it's the same thing that you have on the electronic device. So my suggestion is you print that out first, and then you go through all the chapters and you keep in mind that's what's on the test. That way, it decreases the anxiety and it decreases the, the scatterness that comes with all this material that comes at you. I do the same thing for test 2. However, test 2, God, that's a long chapter. Test 2 is muscles and bones. And so in test 2, in the classroom, I have models and I point to the model and say, what's that called? And you have a list of terms and you choose from that list of terms. Here, you have a list of terms that you can print out. And these are all the terms that will come. Again, this is in a couple of weeks, but these are all the terms that I'll ask you in these coloring labeling exercises on one sheet of paper. So that's what that is. The other thing I have here in the review, I have all these videos I made when I was young and skinny and I had hair. And those go through all the terms on the model. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. As you work your way through the muscles and the bones, go to that chapter, go to the review, watch that video or those videos a few times, because it gives you the nuts and bolts what you need for the test. During the test, review it. I have no problem. I think I gave you, no, I gave you more, I think. I thought I gave you more than 120 minutes. I'll have to look that up. Somebody bring that up if I forget. And then the third thing I have on here as a review is I have a link to pictures that I took right when the pandemic happened. I went to the school and took all these pictures to make the test, but they're all here. All the models that I use for the test are here. It might take a little much ink to print them all, but at least I download them on the tab, or you know, just look them up, bring them up, and then test yourself with those terms. Do I know what this is called? Do I know what this is called? And if you know all the terms on that list over here, you're fine. You should be fine. And I thought I gave you more time. Let me see. Oh, I can't open it right now. No, look at this. 180 minutes. I moved it to 180 minutes, not 120 minutes. So that's 3 hours. So that should be good. Yeah. All right. There we go. And then the third test is about like the first test, where I have a very detailed review that goes through it. And again, you print that out before you work on the material, and then you keep your head straight of what's being asked of you. Good. To finish up, when we go through chemistry, we don't go through too much like modern chemistry. We sort of go with the atoms. You know, we talk about what's an atom, what's a molecule, what are the chemical bonds, how do they get together, how is water formed, why is water formable, that kind of stuff, the reactions. And then we go into biochemistry, the chemistry of life. We talk about some inorganic compounds in our body, like water, like salts, like, you know, when you sweat, these electrolytes, you know, you sweat and you lick and you go like, it's salty. That's the salts. And then acids, bases, that's a very important compounds, very important compounds. They can be very toxic. And then we go to the organic ones, the carbohydrates, the lipids, the protein, the DNA stuff. And then ATP is our molecule that gives us energy. That's the fuel of the body. So we want to ultimately create food broken down molecules. We put some oxygen on top of that, mix that up together, and we get ATP. And ATP is then what the molecule the body can use to drive the process for it, to move our muscles, etc. And that's pretty much, it's a fairly big chapter. I used to be 2 lectures on it. So take some time with it, but I'm hoping, you know, it should be somewhat fairly straightforward as well. So we're not going into nuclear physics and some of that stuff. Then cytology, of course, is the study of cell. Very important. We're getting a little bit more. The first week is kind of the small stuff. So it's a little bit, it's a little bit not all that tangible sometimes, but we make it as tangible as possible. We have a basic structure of a cell, what's in the cell, what are these different organelles, the little organs, what do they do, etc. Here, there, the cell, and we have a cell membrane, we go around. Something has to hold all that stuff in. We have, and then these organelles are the different ones. We talk about them a little bit. I have a bunch of videos on those too. Those are kind of fun. I love YouTube. It just makes it so much easier. And then we go a little into the cell division. We have to go into the hereditary material, the chromosomes, the genes. Briefly, again, it's not that crazy, but it's cool stuff. It's like, how do you, because the DNA basically is a cookbook for protein. And then how do you make protein out of these nucleotides, which you will learn after the chemistry chapter. And so that's kind of interesting to understand that a little bit. We talk about the ribonucleic, the RNA. Oh, RNA, that's now always a discussion point, depending on who you talk to, the mRNA. But we talk about what is DNA, what is RNA. RNA is a copy of DNA, mRNA particularly. So what does that mean? And the term is just, instead of deoxynucleic acid, DNA is a ribonucleic acid. And then from there, of course, we end up going through protein synthesis. That's a very important part of what the cell does, is make proteins. And so that's a two-phasic process. The first phase is basically making an mRNA from a DNA strand or part of the whole double helix. And then the second process is how the heck do we bring all these amino acids, are the molecules that make protein. And you'll learn about the amino acids, what they are in the chemistry chapter. And so how do we bring the right amino acids to make that protein, amino acid chain, and then that becomes the protein. So that's what that discusses. So that's an interesting one. And then the other part that we have to talk about is cell division, mitosis. How does the cell divide? What are the phases of that? What's the process of that? And I should put a video in here. Oh, there is a video. Oh, that's a meiosis. I should put another video in here. Mitosis video. I have one that's really good.
Looks like there's one.
Yeah, I have one. Well, I have a video that visualizes it really nicely because a lot of the stuff is theoretical. And once we can actually see it, how it's visualized, it's really cool. Makes it much more understandable. It's on the booklets in the back. If I forget, just shoot me a text and I'll ship it to everybody on text. And then lastly, in this chapter, we talk about transport. You know, how does things move around in the body? And we have some transports that are passive, like filtration, like when you make coffee, the gravity just puts the water down through the coffee beans, for example. But then also, or diffusion, you put a sugar cube in the water and then slowly the sugar dissolves in the water. But then we also have active processes, and those use energy. ATP, again, energy. They use energy and they need to, like, for example, in the body, you have to create an electrolyte imbalance, like more molecules on one side of the cell membrane than the other side of the cell membrane, that at some point you can just open gates and then these molecules can move around, and that, for example, creates a nerve impulse. But you have to create this concentration challenge where you have a lot of molecules in one space and none in the other, and that create that to create that you would utilize energy. And so that's an active process. Or for example, you have a
is that osmosis?
No, osmosis is up here. Osmosis is the movement of water, but not the movement of the molecules. So like, for example, salt is a good one. Salt attracts, sodium attracts water. So you take a tomato and you slice it and you put a little salt on top, and all of a sudden the salt crystals are water droplets. And so that's the salt can pull the water out of the tomato. And so what you have happening there is you have a membrane on the tomato that doesn't let the salt go in and out, but it lets the water go in and out. And so the water always wants to be balanced with the solutes, with the salt crystals. And so what happens is if you have this beaker here and this membrane is non-permeable for the molecules, but for the water it is, the water molecules then the solutes want to be equally distributed. What that means is in a situation where you have a filter that can bring water go through but not salt, you're going to have the water go to one side, so the molecules and the water are equally distributed. There you go. From the passive processes, osmosis is probably the hardest one. So if that was a little bit like, ooh, never mind, the video will explain it more in detail. And if it's still not clear, you reach out to me and we make a Zoom. Or you know, the other thing I actually have is I have a Zoom room. If I go to home, come on. I have a Zoom room created for you guys to do a study groups in. So if you click on this in the home page, you go to a room that is always there 24/7, and you guys can have study groups if you want to do that. Or I can meet there too. You can text me and say like, hey, we're having a meeting and do you have time that time or whatever it is, and we can arrange that. And I can give you tutoring sessions on that if you want. Okay, so then that's the movement in the cells. And then the last chapter here is the tissue chapter. And the tissue chapter Again, lots of videos. Talks about, you know, the different types of tissues, and then it goes into the epithelial tissue, what's the function, what is it looking like, the characteristics. The epithelial tissue is sort of, you think of like your skin, the things that covers things. Epithelial tissue covers things and lines things. So it lines like your blood vessels on the inside. It's got a thin layer of that, or the skin is surrounding the body that covers the body. That's epithelial tissue. And so that's sort of the main place. And so then we talk about what does it take, you know, on the skin, the cells need to have attachments to one another, for example, here junctions that really anchor the cells to one another, so that you will pull on the skin, it doesn't just rip apart, for example. So we talk about that in this chapter here. The different tissue types. The epithelial tissue comes in different levels of cells. It has cube level cells, like in the gut lining, there are more cubes. No, in the gut lining, they're actually more columnar, which is more of a column-shaped cell type. So we have column shape, we have cuboidal, which is cube, and then we have flat fried eggs, that's squamous. And we have either a simple layer, one layer cells, like for example, in the gut, a lot of it is one layer, and then the nutrients can be absorbed through that layer. But in the skin, for example, you have many layers of cells that then create the skin. Thank God, otherwise we'd be always bleeding and everything. So we talk about that kind of stuff in there. And then also the glands itself, like sweat glands, that's epithelial as well. And then some sensory nerves are also some sensory receptors that pick up stuff from the outside, like the light, and then we make eyesight with it and so forth. Or the touch receptors, that when we touch somebody, then they can feel that we touch them, or temperature, et cetera, et cetera. Those are also epithelial. And then the next big tissue type is connective tissue, and that's a really big tissue type, and it's connecting everything together. And so we have different components of that. We have cells, and we have, you think of bone, for example, bone cells, and then there's a lot of calcium, you know, bones has a lot of calcium in it, and that's in the ground. They call it the intercellular substance. Inter means in between the cells substance. They also call it the extracellular matrix, the ECM. If you've been in the medical field, the ECM is a term that is used for when we need to put a different tissue on it to grow tissue or to secure it. So we have some of that in there. Then we also have fibers, like collagen fibers, or in the ear we have elastic fibers, so we can twist the ear and it goes right to its original shape again. So we talk about those kind of basics, and then we have different tissue types, and every tissue type has the same basic structure, but connective tissue can be adipose, can be fat tissue, it can be structural, it can be like a tendon, that's a tendon here, or it can even be bone or cartilage. And so, and blood is also connective tissue. So there's a lot of different types of that. And then we spend a little bit of time in cartilage and then in bone. And those are two connective tissue types that we go more in detail on, because after the bone, we're going to go into the bones and talk about the different bones. So that's about it, I think. Are there any questions at this point?
Nope, just looking forward to getting down to it.
Yep.
Good, good. Then we're gonna do that. And if you have any question coming up, just shoot me a text and I'll answer it. No, don't hesitate. That's the main thing. Do not hesitate reaching out. All right.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. So if nothing comes up now, I'm staying around a little bit longer, but other than that, we can call it a day.
Okay, thank you,
Thank you.
Dr. M.
Thank you.
Good luck to everyone.
Okay.